Good morning. The Commission's administrative meeting will begin in approximately 2 or 3 minutes. We're running a little behind today. Thank you for your understanding. Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's meeting for December 15th, 2021. Before we begin today, we have a new employee that has joined our engineering division. Ms. Latangia Bunch is a new engineer where she will be working with respect to our electricity system and the reliability related with that infrastructure. She joined the commission back on December 1st. She has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Morgan State University. And she was most recently employed with the respected firm of EBA Engineering, which is a consulting firm in Laurel. So congratulations, Ms. Bunch. We welcome you to the Public Service Commission. We do have meeting minutes to approve from our last meeting of December 1st, 2021. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 3 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is a notice of cancellation of bond from Platte River Insurance Company for DeMorian Linton LLC, DBA Inertia Resources. Item number 2 is a notice from Inspire Energy Holdings, Inc. of change in ownership. And item number 3 is an application from Jason Collum for certification of a geothermal heating and cooling renewable energy facility.
Thank you. I do have some questions for item number 2 with respect to Inspire Energy Holdings. If representatives could appear, and I see a number of them. Good morning, Mr. Wallace. Can you make an appearance for the company?
Yeah, good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Eric Wallace with the law firm Green Herlocker here on behalf of Inspire Energy Holdings. I'm joined by Dan Bell, the Chief of Staff for Inspire, and Stephanie Donner, the Chief Legal and People Officer for the company. And we're happy to answer any questions that the Chairman of the Commissioners may have.
Thank you, Counsel. I do see that we have a relatively simple request before the Commission today. However, in reviewing staff's buck sheet, as well as the public complaint information from the Consumer Affairs Division with respect to complaints that have been filed, against Inspire. It appears that there were 28 complaints filed with us since December of 2019 for allegations including slamming and supplier misrepresentation. The company also triggered public reporting in the month of April of this year by having more than 3 complaints filed with the Consumer Affairs Division. I'd like to hear from the company as to what they are doing to ensure that complaints are, if not eliminated, limited to some extent, because the trend is concerning.
Yeah, Your Honor. So the company is absolutely committed to compliance and addressing consumer complaint issues that arise from its operations in Maryland. As a company, Inspire is, they're working to build long-term relationships with customers by offering fixed price contracts purely for clean energy in Maryland, and that's their business model. And we certainly understand the concern around the reporting that was flagged last year in the month of April. Of those 4 complaints, it appears that 2 of them were resolved in favor of the company, 2 in favor of the customer that had filed the complaint. And Inspire and the team internally is committed to working through issues that arise, and if there's our individual agents in the field that need to be retrained so they're investigating those complaints, and they're taking the appropriate action, which might include retraining or moving agents if there's issues around particular agents out there. But as a kind of a general response to the concern, this is something that the company is concerned about. I think that the fact that it was 1 month last year where they triggered the report shows that that they're taking these things seriously, and that it's not a trend that's headed in the wrong direction. I think it's a trend that's headed in the right direction, and the company's committed to working with customers and CAD to make sure that these issues are addressed and mitigated going forward. With that, I'd like to open the floor to Dan or Stephanie if you have additional thoughts or comments on this issue.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. It's an honor to meet you. Appreciate you taking up our issue this morning and hearing us. In addition to what Mr. Wallace did say on behalf of the company, I can tell you that we have gone back and looked at our complaint history and ratio in comparison to the number of customers that we serve in the state of Maryland. And our complaint percentage vis-a-vis the number of customers that we currently serve is approximately 0.0009%. And we have about 36,000 customers in Maryland. So that is just to give you a sense of how many complaints we're getting vis-a-vis the number of customers that we're serving. We also had an opportunity to look into the nature of the 28 complaints that we've had since December 2019, and we're able to determine that for the majority of customers, the complaints were not centered around misrepresentation or slamming. They were more centered around enrollment, questions about enrollment, and we were able to resolve those directly with the customers. So things are, we continue to retrain our agents. We continue to train our sales force to the extent that we have new ones and to the extent that we have other ones that need to. And with every complaint that we get, whether we're able to resolve it or not, we do investigate with the various sales agents and raise that to our sales partners.
Thank you. It is imperative that your agents, those who represent your company, although are not employees of Inspire, have the potential to either make your business model a success or to cause a lot of trouble, particularly with this commission. I recognize that you recently had some door knockers in Upper Marlboro and Brandywine who may not have fully understood the product, the complicated product they're attempting to effectively sell to folks who are opening their doors and willing to listen to the sales pitch. So I do emphasize that with every retail supplier in the state, because we see time and time again the problem is oftentimes not with the mailers that you use via first class mail, but having these agents on your behalf operating at kiosks, knocking on folks' doors, who may not have been fully trained. I would also remind you and the retail supplier community that all of your door knockers, we need to know what zip codes that they are knocking on doors, and that needs to be provided to the Consumer Affairs Division. I do have anything else from the Inspire folks on that?
No, I was just going to say thank you very much for that reminder. And we do have a sales quality team that is strictly focused on following up on these issues, and to the extent necessary, either terminating agents, terminating partners, or like I said, retraining. So we do definitely share your concern and appreciate your reminder.
Thank you. If my colleagues would indulge me, I have a somewhat unrelated question for Inspire. That is not germane to this proceeding, but since we have the executives on the line, I would like to ask them a few more questions. But before we depart from the substance of this item, do my colleagues have any questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Donner, you seem to minimize the seriousness of the complaints by reducing to a percentage of the number of customers you served. I think you said 0.0009%. But does the company understand that zero tolerance is the standard, that full compliance with the regulations and statutes of the state of Maryland with regard to consumer protections is the standard, that there's no acceptable level of non-compliance? I mean, you seem to think, well, or you seem to convey to me, to this commissioner, that maybe a small percentage is okay. Please help me out with that.
Sure. I appreciate the clarification. Sir, in no uncertain terms do we think that any number of violations is acceptable. We also have a zero tolerance policy at Inspire. Strictly pointing out the ratio was to help demonstrate that we do take this very seriously on the front end and on the back end of any of our operations. And we are proud that we do have a zero tolerance policy. And we have a relatively low number of complaints, in my opinion, is because we are so aggressive, both, like I said, on the training part, but also on the sales quality side. But no, we internally also have a zero tolerance and have no problem, and have done so in the past, with terminating partners or agents, and we do so swiftly. We are in the business of trying to build long-term relationships with our customers. So even one complaint can diminish our reputation, but also the customer satisfaction, which can snowball, and that is not our objective at all.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. If one consumer in the state of Maryland is harmed because of violations of our consumer protection regulations or statute, that's one too many. And this commission has taken a very strong zero tolerance policy. And we want to convey that to you, to the broader third-party supplier community, to our staff, to other stakeholders. We're serious about this, and I want that message to be heard loud and clear.
I appreciate that, and we are too, and we ensure that is in our materials, in our contracts with partners, and we invest heavily in that same principle. So we share that.
Thank you for that. I hear these things reduced to numbers so often as a percentage, and it's like, I'm not interested in that. That falls flat with me, and I don't want to hear that. Zero tolerance is the policy.
As to my separate unrelated item, pre-pandemic, we received requests from both Inspire and Constellation to launch respective time of use programs. I understand Constellation has moved forward with theirs. With respect to Inspire, we last heard from you towards the beginning of the pandemic, stating that Inspire was going to hold off on the TOU program. And I don't believe we've received any update since that last correspondence. Can the council or the TOU representatives provide us with an update as to where that program is?
Yeah, Your Honor, I'm not familiar with the specifics of that. Maybe Dan or Stephanie is familiar with kind of what the status is internally, or we could look into it and follow up with an update.
And I recognize I'm catching you off guard on this. Ms. Donner or Mr. Bell?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on behalf of the company for that. We actually had a transition in a regulatory team around the time that you mentioned. So I believe that there may have been an effort at that time on this program, but we haven't taken any action since. But as Mr. Wallace alluded, I think we'll have to follow up and look into the status of that. But as of right now, we're not aware of any kind of ongoing effort to move that forward.
Okay, well, if you can, sometime before the end of next month, provide us with some official correspondence, just providing us with an update as to whether you're moving forward with that program or if you're going to rescind the approval that the commission granted.
We're absolutely happy to do that.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. There's nothing else on this item. Do commissioners have questions on the other two consent agenda items? Seeing none, with respect to item number 1, Platte River Insurance Company, I move that we cancel the company's electricity and natural gas supplier licenses. With respect to number 2, Inspire Energy Holdings Incorporated, I move that we note the filing. And with respect to item number 3, involving Mr. Jason Cullum, I move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility certification number and energy savings estimate. Direct Mr. Cullum to establish a REC account with PJM Gas within 30 days of certification and file a geothermal and thermal biomass generation report with the commission within 1 week of each recording of generation data with GATS of RECs created. And direct Mr. Cullum to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any change to the information in his application. Vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 4 on today's administrative agenda consists of updated energy storage project costs and operational start dates under case number 9619 for Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, and Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. On this item, there are several participants. For staff, DeAndre Wilson, Michael Zhang, and Michael Dean. For PHI, Delmarva and Pepco, Matt Seegers, Stephen Sunderhoff, Stephen Park, Lawrence Mena, Bob Andrikaitis, and Michael Hendrick. For BGE, Dan Herson, Kyle Hare, Brian Green, Lily Kuchka, and Justin Felt. And more generally for Exelon, David Bloom, Ed Chow, Bill Birch, and for OPC, Joe Cleaver.
Thank you. We'll begin with staff. No. Mr. Wilson, you're on mute.
Sorry, my apologies. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, and staff. This is DeAndre Wilson speaking on behalf of the Engineering Division of PSC. Speaking on behalf of the Energy Storage Pilot Project updates filed by Exelon Utility. Pursuant to the Energy Storage Pilot Project Act, the Commission approved the proposed energy storage projects by order number 89664, with the stipulation that the electric companies would notify the Commission should they anticipate that the projects would need to expend more than 50% of the approved contingency funding by order paragraph 78. On October 1st, 2021, Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, and Baltimore Gas and Electric Company filed updated project costs pursuant to order paragraph 78, reporting updated estimates for 4 of the 6 proposed energy storage pilot projects whose contingency funding is anticipated to exceed 50% of what was previously approved. Those projects include Fairhaven, Chesapeake, Ocean City, and National Harbor. The companies also submitted updated operational start dates for 5 of the 6 proposed energy storage projects, which include Fairhaven, Chesapeake, Ocean City, National Harbor, and Bus Depot. In conclusion, after staff's review of the filings, the updated project costs all reflect decreases to their benefit cost ratio, but not by a significant amount compared to their original benefit cost ratio estimates previously filed, with the exception of the Chesapeake project, whose estimated cost effectiveness decreased the most due to the project having the largest total cost increase of 49%. Also, the project operational date delays for the Fairhaven, Chesapeake, Bus Depot, and National Harbor projects are not impactful to the primary value streams for those projects, or appear to only be marginally impacted, or marginally impacts the BCR benefits or benefit cost ratio, as in the case of Ocean City's project. As a recommendation, pursuant to Public Utilities Article Title 7, subsection 216 H62, staff recommends the commission approve the requested operational date extensions for good cause. OPC has also filed comments on the matter as well. And this concludes staff's introduction to the filing. Engineering staff and the staff economists are here to answer any questions you may have, and also representatives from Exelon Utilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, and to the staff team. As you noted, Office of People's Counsel did file extensive comments. We'll turn to Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's soft, but we could hear you.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I'll try to speak up. Your Honor, as OPC noted in its letter of Monday, December 13th, OPC has not changed its position that these 6 Exelon energy storage projects should go forward. We recommended that they go forward when we filed comments on them initially in June 2020, and that position hasn't changed. OPC recognizes that the General Assembly, as is clear from Section 7216, wants to see these projects deployed. OPC, as an agency, views energy storage optimistically, and we think it holds great promise. Also, as Mr. Wilson pointed out, the changes that we've seen here don't dramatically affect the BCRs for these projects. And finally, as was revealed in some discovery that staff had propounded to the company, if the companies were to back out of these projects now, there'd be a fair amount of stranded costs. So for all those reasons, OPC has not changed its initial position. However, OPC is concerned by several aspects of the filing. First, with respect to the contingency budgets, OPC interpreted the commission's order and has interpreted the discussion of contingencies generally at this commission as request for a commission authorization, or at least acknowledgement of a reserve amount to spend in the event that the initial cost projections prove too low. And then the commission asked, or required rather, in its order, after approving the contingencies, required the utilities to notify it if it anticipated to, quote, expend more than 50% of the approved contingency funding. With this filing, the Exelon utilities have notified the commission that for 4 of the projects, more than 50%, and in some instances more than 100% of the contingency funding it anticipates that it will spend that. But rather than treating the contingency budgets as therefore exhausted or depleted by the percentage that the companies now plan to spend of those contingency figures, what the companies have done here, and this is set forth in Table 2 of the October 1st filing, is to simply take the initial projected cost, the initially authorized contingency budget, and then to add the new incremental cost on top. So that effectively leaves the contingency budgets entirely undisturbed. Or you could look at it as the utilities are proposing to entirely replenish these contingency budgets. In our view, as an agency, in our interpretation of the commission's order, the commission did not intend for that evergreen type treatment of contingency budgets. We recognize that the commission at this time in this proceeding is not approving the recovery of the costs reflected in the contingency budgets. But if the commission were to sign off on this filing without more, I think there's a pretty good chance that in the event that these contingency budgets that would remain following this filing, in the event that the utilities resort to using those funds, the utilities would likely argue when the issue of cost recovery is before the commission that the commission knew about these balances and signed off on them. So that's why OPC is concerned. It appears from looking at Table 2 that the utilities are effectively paving the way for another filing like this down the road in the utilities' efforts to retain these budgets in their entirety, despite the fact that some or all of the funds have been exhausted at this point. Two, and related to that issue, OPC is concerned by the cost increases. As we noted in the letter, and we recognize, and the commission recognized, that this is a new type of technology and that these are new types of projects. So it's not surprising that there'd be some cost increases that were unanticipated. And we also acknowledge that some of the reasons the utilities have provided for the cost increases are understandable, including supply chain issues that are affecting all industries. But just considering how pervasive these cost increases are and how significant they are in relation to the project estimates, that raises concerns for us. Again, we recognize that the commission's not granting the utilities the right to recover these costs at this time and in this filing. But again, considering that the utilities are acting pursuant to a statutory pilot and that they're presenting these updated estimates to the commission, there could potentially be an argument once the utilities come to recover these costs that, well, the commission, you knew about this and you knew about these costs. And then again, tying back to the first point about the contingencies, you signed off on it. So OPC would ask the commission to accompany any approval of this filing with a clarification that any additional cost beyond what's included in this filing would be subject to disallowance. Not asking the commission to make any determination in that regard now. We recognize it's not appropriate, but do believe that such a clarification would be helpful once we get to the point where we're reviewing these costs. And finally, Your Honors, with respect to the operational delays, again, based on the fact that OPC has not changed its position that these projects should go forward, that's the primary reason that we don't oppose the delays, because if you read the statute, I think that the commission granting these extensions is necessary to the project's survival under the law. So we don't oppose those. We do question some of the rationales provided. Again, some are reasonable, having to do with the current situation, current economic conditions, current trade conditions. We recognize all those. But some of these, I believe for 4 of the 5, the utilities have reported that contract negotiations took longer than they anticipated. Just considering how widespread that is and considering that, the sophistication of utilities, we wouldn't have expected to have seen that. So on that point, OPC's request is that also in connection with any approval of this filing, the commission make clear to the utilities that it will grant these requests for extension, but that further extensions will not be granted absent compelling circumstances that are entirely unforeseeable at this time. I'm available for questions, Your Honors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to the representative for the joint utilities. We've obviously reviewed the filing. Mr. Cleaver just made 2 relatively simple requests. If you could respond to OPC in your response, that would be appreciated.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Daniel Herson for BGE. And joining me today is my colleague, Matt Seegers, representing the PHI companies, Pepco and Delmarva Power. As Mr. Johnston stated, we are also joined by a number of subject matter experts from each utility that are available, along with Mr. Seegers and myself, to answer any questions you may have regarding the specific energy storage projects or the suite of projects as a whole. Really, what your honors have before you today is a simple request from the joint utilities to extend the operational deadline for 5 of the energy storage projects that the commission approved in November of last year. I do want to thank staff and OPC for their thoughtful comments on our filing. We're pleased that they recommend that the requested deadline extensions be granted. As your honors know, Public Utilities Article Section 7216 states in part in subsection H6 that the approved projects shall become operational on or before February 28th, 2022. But the commission has the authority to grant an extension of that deadline for good cause shown for unanticipated project development delays. We are submitting today that with respect to the 5 projects at issue, there have been unanticipated project development delays, really attributable to a number of issues, including but not limited to permitting requirements, additional IT design necessities involving cybersecurity and system interconnection needs. We've had some supply chain and labor resource constraint issues attributable to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and this has effectively delayed the availability and delivery of necessary goods and services to complete construction of these projects. We have had extended contract negotiations due to complex provisions regarding really the unique nature of these projects. And this being a first time experience of the utilities dealing with energy storage coupled with wholesale market participation, these are some complex issues. And so these contracts took some time to get in place. And for some of the projects, we even had to acquire some additional land and take care of some project access needs. With any new venture, and excuse me, I will submit these are indeed new ventures for the utility. One might expect to encounter some difficulties and unknowns. However, the breadth and extent of the issues encountered thus far with these projects was not expected at the time BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva Power filed their applications with the commission back in April 2020. Rather, these are issues that have arisen post-filing, and in many cases, after the commission approved the projects, as the utilities have moved forward with the design, permitting, and construction of the projects. Importantly, we don't believe the delays and the requested operational deadline extensions will negatively impact the overall effectiveness of the projects or lessen the benefits that the projects can deliver to our customers and the public. Therefore, that's why we're respectfully requesting that the commission grant the deadline extensions. And the 5 projects are the Fairhaven, Chesapeake, National Harbor, Ocean City, and Bus Depot projects. Mr. Chairman, in response to your question, I did want to address briefly staff and OPC's comments. With respect to staff's comments, the joint utilities don't necessarily agree with the way staff calculated their updated benefit cost ratios for the various projects. And I think reasonable minds can differ on how to approach that. But overall, we're pleased with staff's ultimate recommendation regarding the deadline extension request. We're also pleased to see that OPC continues to support the projects and finds the extension deadline request acceptable. That being said, we don't believe the commission should adopt OPC's other recommendations because we don't believe at this time they're necessary. Regarding the contingency cost, there's no need for any commission statement at this particular juncture regarding potential rejection of the projects or disallowance of cost recovery based on the use of contingency funds. I think the commission's November 2020 order approving these projects was very clear that the issue of cost recovery would be handled in the context of a future rate case or rate proceeding. OPC staff, the commissioners, other interveners will certainly have that opportunity to review and challenge any costs in those cases when the time comes around. Also, regarding the recommendation against no further extensions, the pilot program statute expressly provides, excuse me, that the commission has the ability to approve an extension of the operating deadlines for good cause shown. I can say it's certainly our intent today that we will not be coming before the commission again to seek any further extensions. That is not something that we're seeking to do. However, the commission should not preclude the ability of the joint utilities to seek, or the commission's ability really to grant future extensions for good cause. And, you know, an additional word about the costs. I acknowledge that it's frustrating to see some of these cost increases. And, you know, are we learning lessons here that we can apply to future projects to help ensure that we don't have these similar kinds of delays or cost increases? I would say absolutely. But it's important, I think, to remember this is a pilot project. Pilots often involve lessons learned. We're all working diligently to get these projects up and running. We're still excited about the potential these projects will offer and how they can be demonstrations for technologies that we believe will play a vital part in the efforts to reach important state goals. There will be a time and a place to argue about the costs. A prudency analysis will take place. People are free to make whatever arguments they feel in terms of how the utility estimated, approached, and executed on cost figures. But really, I think, you know, what's in front of the commission today is the request for the extension. So with that, I will stop, and we are available to answer any questions that your honors may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herson, for that response. I read OPC's comments a number of times here. It's clear that since we approved these pilot programs for Exelon, the 6 of them, just last year, that some of the projections have been way off the mark in terms of costs. And we do have a responsibility at the commission to serve as a check here in terms of cost containment, recognizing that this is a state required program here. But Mr. Herson, tell me, what is the purpose of a contingency budget if this budget will remain untouched and the cost overruns are simply added on top, and we never go into the corpus of the contingency budget? I think that was one of OPC's primary concerns here. Well, why do we even have one if the Exelon utilities are just going to tack this onto the top of the existing project budgets?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a fair question, and I think OPC's observations are fair. I don't do project management, you know, as my day job, but I am told that contingencies are put on project budgets to reflect risk. And despite the fact that we have had substantial cost increases on some of components of these projects, which have increased the budgets, that risk still remains with respect to the projects. So even though with these cost increases, we have, as you say, you know, gone into the corpus of the original contingency, that does not negate the need to continue to have a contingency for the projects. So that's why we calculated it the way we did and continue to have that contingency there. You know, as I mentioned earlier, at some point when we look at the costs and cost recovery becomes the issue, I think reasonable minds can differ on, you know, what's the right application there. We understand that we have the burden and we have the duty to explain, you know, how we estimate costs, how we've expended costs, and, you know, we're going to do everything we can to justify the need for either the spend itself or any particular contingencies. But again, I think that's something that can be, you know, handled in the rate proceedings.
Well, while you do have the burden, I trust OPC's concern here is that they recognize that this is a state authorized program. Disallowance of costs by this commission, as Mr. Cleaver said, is probably highly unlikely. We won't prejudge that proceeding down the road, but that's probably the case since the utilities are executing. But Mr. Herson, I did not quite understand your reasoning there. You're saying that the contingency budgets should remain untouched because it exists to protect against some other risk aside from these unanticipated cost increases?
Well, let me try to be a little bit more clear, and if not, I'll have to rely on some of my team members. what the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that a contingency is there to account for a risk that when you're estimating a project cost or components of a project cost, you don't necessarily know all the costs or expenses you might run into. I was simply trying to state that despite the fact that we've had increases in costs related to the project, that does not entirely remove risks, on a going forward basis. As we sit here today in December of 2021, and these projects, are not going to be completed until first, second, third quarter of 2022. There's still some risks there that some of the, I'll call them updated estimates we've provided, may not come to fruition, and we may have increased costs above that, and that's why we still maintain a contingency. So it was really to reflect the fact that you still have risks, you still have unknowns associated with these projects, even though you've updated your costs, all your cost predictions. If that doesn't help explain, I'm going to have to rely on.
Mr. Herson, that's enough for me for now. I'll have some additional questions. I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Herson,
Yes, sir.
why not just utilize the contingency? And if you have additional budget overruns going forward, do that in the true up when you see cost recovery. I don't get it. Why? I mean, you talk about risk. I suppose you're talking about risk to the utility, but these were based on budgets that the utility submitted. Why should that risk remain with the ratepayers and not shift to the utilities? Because they were your budgets that you submitted in the first place. Why shouldn't there be some shifting of risk to the utilities? Because we're operating off of your submitted budget estimates.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Commissioner O'Donnell. It's a good observation. I don't know that at this point we're necessarily shifting that risk to the ratepayers because we're not making any decisions today about cost recovery. We're just trying to be transparent about, these are our updated budgets. This is our updated projections, and the fact that we still think there's a chance that the updated numbers we're providing may not cover all the costs we encounter. What those risks may be, I don't know. What those unknowns might be, I'm not sure.
I would suggest to you that you can't have it both ways. You can't say we need to keep the contingency budgets intact at 100% of their submitted level.
Well, I don't think we. I mean, we're
Hang
just
on,
trying to be.
hang on. I'm not done. I just had a
Okay.
interruption here.
Okay.
So you want to maintain these contingency budgets at 100% of what you submitted, and you argue that you need that for risk mitigation, but then you suggest that we're not shifting risk to the ratepayers. But if you burn through another 100% of that contingency budget, you are shifting risk to the ratepayers. So, what the budgets mean? Why not just utilize the contingency for its intended purposes? And then if you go over that, justify it later when we do the cost recovery piece. I don't get what's going on here with regard to not utilizing the contingency. We asked you to report to us when 50% of the contingency was used, and yet you're telling us you're not using 50% of the contingency because you're going to maintain 100% of its submitted value.
Well, no, we've used it. We're into it.
Well, but
because
you're
we're above
replenishing
those numbers.
it. According to OPC, you're replenishing it. You're keeping 100% of the contingency.
Well,
intact
we're
going
asking.
forward.
Yes, we're asking for a renewal of it.
So respond to my question.
Well, I don't, Commissioner O'Donnell, we're not asking you today to approve new budget numbers for these projects. We were just trying to be transparent about our updated cost projections and pursuant to the commission's order to notify the commission about how we viewed the project expenditures going forward. If it's the commission's desire that, we call that something different, we portray that in a different way, if it's the commission's desire that, you know, we have to reflect that as we've used all of the contingency and, you know, now we're just projecting higher costs overall to the project, I don't think we have a problem with that. We can do that.
All right,
We had
fair
just
enough.
proposed it because contingency equals risk. We thought there's still ongoing risk with these projects. That's why we portrayed it the way we did. But
Fair
how the
enough.
commission
I
wants to
just don't
account
want
for
there
it,
to
that's
be any
fine.
confusion going forward that we were approving these cost overruns in any way, shape, or form and giving you carte blanche to go and utilize 100% of a new contingency. That
Yeah,
we originally
I
approved.
appreciate that. I absolutely understand that comment, that concern. We were not looking for uh, implicit or explicit approval of updated budget numbers here. This was simply a notification and trying to be transparent with where we are on the budgets for these projects. But I hear you loud and clear, and we're not asking for approval, and we're not asking for carte blanche here, and
All right.
we're not asking for a new budget. We're just
Fair enough.
we're
So
just
the,
showing.
so to make sure I understand, the cost overruns will be deducted from the approved contingency budgets and will not be replenished to 100%, so you can go burn through another 100% of the contingency budget.
I guess we will not portray the costs incurred in that manner.
All right,
We
fair enough.
will have
Thank you.
gone through the original contingency. Yes.
Additional questions, Commissioner Herman?
So, I have to say I'm having a little trouble, Mr. Cleaver and you know, from BGE, I'm looking at table 2. Mr. Cleaver, where does it show that the contingency is expanded to its original percentage? Because I'm just trying to do the math and I don't see it. But then again, that's not necessarily my forte. So help me understand where it is you're saying that the contingency is added back in on the revised updated cost.
Yes, good morning, Commissioner Herman. Thank you. It's probably actually not correct to say it's the exact same percentage, because now that the estimate is much higher based on how the company calculated it, the percentage would be a bit lower, but the amount, the actual dollar amount of the contingency as presented in the first case, if you look at table 2, remains undisturbed. So let me, if I could go there. Bear with me, Your Honor. Okay, so on table 2, for example, Fairhaven, the estimated cost that the commission received from the companies last year was, you know, this $7.87 million figure. That's column 1. And then the contingency that the utilities presented to the commission last year was what's in column 2, the $1.968 million figure. And so the total filed cost in column 3 is what the commission saw last year. For Fairhaven, it's $9.841 million.
Mm-hmm.
The company calculates updated incremental costs of $1.373 million here in column 4, as reflected there. But rather than, but that number, that incremental cost shouldn't change the number in column 3 if you're using a contingency for its intended purpose. The number in column 3 shouldn't change, the total filed cost, because as you can see here for Fairhaven, the company has sufficient contingency reserve, what appears in column 2, to cover that cost. So the total filed cost shouldn't change for Fairhaven. It should remain at 9,841.
Gotcha. Okay.
But now, but rather than do it that way, instead of, you know, essentially, to use the words of the commission, expending the contingency funds, rather than do it that way, the company took, and this is set forth in the key that appears at the bottom, the company took this incremental cost in column 4 and added it to the total filed cost in column 3 that the commission saw in 2020, which includes contingency, to get this new column 5, quote, total updated cost of $11.214 million. So if the $11.214 million includes the initial estimate in column 1, the updated incremental cost in column 4, and the filed contingency in column 2. If you add 1 + 2 + 4, you get 5.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. I appreciate that because I was having a hard time seeing that through the numbers. But I think, Mr. Herson, I understand and also appreciate OPC's argument. And my point, my concern is that if you say that your budget that you haven't expended through your contingency, then there seems to be potentially less of a incentive to keep your costs to where you originally proposed that they would be. And I understand there are going to be cost overruns. So from my standpoint, I understand and appreciate OPC's arguments for the purpose of holding the company's feet to the fire to try to keep the project costs as low as they can be. So I'm not sure that language is required, but I assume I do understand and appreciate OPC's argument and would agree with them that when we do look at cost recovery, that we will be examining these costs closely and that the company should be very careful with additional cost overruns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Linton. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Richard. No. Okay. I wasn't sure if that was a yes.
Well, I suspect we'll probably ask different questions anyway, so. Good morning, everyone. I have some questions for the joint utilities regarding your, sorry, text messages here, regarding
That is jingle bells.
I tried to turn it off. It's regarding your data responses to section staff data response 9-01D. It's regarding some of the reasons for the cost impacts. And one of the justifications you provided was, among a couple different things, is that there were developing internal resource constraints. Could you help me understand what you meant by that?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Linton. I was just trying to scroll to the response itself. You stated it was 901.
D, lowercase d. I don't know if that's
Okay.
large D. I don't think so.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes, I see that. Yeah. So the response here was meant to reflect the fact that, when we filed the projects back in April 2020, we had certain ideas and expectations of what we were able to handle internally with respect to some of these projects. And, we had a budget that reflected that accordingly. It became clear as we got into further project design and development that we underestimated our capacity to handle that responsibility entirely in-house. And some of that was due to changes in technology, some of the equipment change, some of it was due to changes in the project scope, and some of it was just the fact that with the passage of time, you have internal transitions, you have other needs arrive, other resource constraints develop. So it became clear to us as time went on that we were going to have to reach out to get some external help with some of these projects. Frankly, which are really new to us. I mean, BGE has the Cold Spring battery project, but that's really the extent of our area, our entrance into this space. And I'm not sure PHI had any. And Cold Spring is a different kind of project and smaller, and it didn't have some of the technicalities that for BGE, the Fairhaven and Chesapeake projects do. So we did have to reach outside, and there's costs associated with that. So that's
Okay,
how
so
that happened.
Mr. Herson, let me ask it a different way. When I read this section of your response, my initial thought was that the company had the internal resources to manage portions of this project, but for some other reason, there was some constraint that was unexpected, and that resulted in you having to, and this is just me trying to fill in the blanks here, basically reassign your staff to something else. So is that what happened when you say you had developing internal resource constraints? So did you have the expertise and just reassign it, or did you just not have the expertise at all after the project development?
I believe it was more of the latter, that we did not have the full expertise that we thought we might have, you know, when we first started down this road. But maybe I need to have some of my subject matter experts confirm my statements on this. So for BGE, that would be Mr. Hare and Mr. Felt. Gentlemen, are you available?
Yes, this is Kyle Hare for BGE. That's correct, the statement that you made, Dan. As we got further into the engineering and design of these projects, it became clear that we did not have all the expertise that we needed.
And so we had to go outside of the company to obtain that.
That's correct, Dan.
So this is more of an explanation about a lack of expertise as opposed to the company having the expertise but choosing to use the employees elsewhere. So there wasn't an external constraint that caused you to not be able to continue with the project.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Yeah, I
Right,
think
so-
Commissioner Linton, I think our intention, and again, my client can correct me if I misstate. If we have the expertise in the house, we're going to want to use that. That's good for a couple reasons. One, it keeps costs under more control, and two, we're developing experience in house, you know, for energy storage projects that we could utilize going forward, you know, in the event we pursue additional projects down the line. So I think, you know, if we can do that, we like to do that. But as Mr. Hare was saying, it became clear that we just didn't have that here for these particular projects.
So no, I appreciate that. I think that to some extent, part of the, and this is me speaking from Baltimore City, but part of the General Assembly's expectation was that the utilities would have some expertise. And so the initial budgets we were reviewing obviously took that into consideration because that's what the company provided us. So it kind of leads into my next question, which is basically at the bottom of the same answer, regarding how the company looks to make sure we don't have additional increases or unexpected costs going forward, which is part of our original order. Is this the question of how the company will prevent this from continuing? And so the answer that I see at the bottom of 901D talks about a vetting project or process by the project team with an additional review if its expense is over $50,000. Are these, so who's going to do that review if the expertise is not internal? Is that going to be people external, or who's going to handle that?
Well, I think that the internal review process that we're referencing there, Commissioner Linton, has to do with cost increases. So regardless of whether those increases were associated with additional internal resources or, in this case, the obtaining and retention of outside resources, if it's going to be over $50,000, it's going to be subjected to additional scrutiny internally at the company by both the project management and to the executive level, because we are sensitive to the cost, you know, issues associated with these projects and the fact that this is a pilot and that this is a statutorily mandated program. So I think to answer your question, that's going to be regardless of whether it's internal or external resources. If it crosses that threshold, it's going to be subjected to this additional scrutiny.
All right, thank you, Mr. Herson. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're probably, at least all four of us are asking a question maybe in a slightly different way, but I just wanted to ask Mr. Wilson. Just when as I'm looking at this, the motion that's being proposed today, we are simply just extending the operational dates of these projects. Is that correct? There's nothing at all that we are implying at all or accepting at all about any change in budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Commissioner. We just examined the filing, the numbers that were filed in the filing, that were provided in the filing, and as far as I know, the economist was simply just comparing the benefit cost ratio to what had previously been filed. So we're simply agreeing with the projects moving forward. We're not in our testimony, we're not agreeing to any changes in budget or anything of that sort.
Okay.
Recommendations.
I'm sorry. And so the company is, as required, just coming to us and notifying us that they have gone and they've exceeded the contingencies at this point. And there's nothing in that notification that provides them an opportunity, does it, to change budgets?
That is correct. Based on the commission's order, the utilities are required to notify us by order paragraph 78. They are to notify us of any estimated or anticipated cost increases. And we, from our understanding, that's what utilities are doing. We are not advising or approving any increased budgets at this time.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, because I very much appreciate OPC bringing their concerns to our attention. But again, from my standpoint, all we're doing today is extending the projects and in no way changing anything about the budget of these projects or their contingencies. So thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Cleaver, let me ask you this. Do you believe table 2, based on all of this discussion, is in error and should be reformulated to reflect the spend of the contingency budgets, and that it doesn't reflect that now?
Yes, yes, I do, Your Honor, and I appreciate that question. I understand Mr. Wilson's responses to Commissioner Richard, but I would just add that that aspect of this filing is being made pursuant to a commission order requiring the filing, and yet it doesn't. Again, I don't want to repeat the points of earlier. I think everyone understands them now, but it doesn't reflect simply a use of the budgets. It reflects a brand new approach to how the company's calculating the budgets. And if it's a filing made pursuant to a commission order and it's on the administrative agenda and people talk about it and the commission says, okay, I think that could be construed down the road as commission approval. So for those reasons, Your Honor, I would answer your question, yes. I do believe the table should be refiled.
I tend to agree with you, and I also believe that if our original order in approving these pilots required a report at 50% spend of the contingency fund, that still stands. And so if we were to approve table 2 and they burn through another 50% of any contingency budgets, they'd have to come in and file again. And they simply will, based on precedent, incrementally add to the total budget of the projects and not burn through the contingency. And I think that's very germane. We may not be approving that at this point, but I have to tell you, it's very concerning to me in terms of setting precedent and what this commission has considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The commission would always rather be in a position to have these projects on time and under budget. As we stand now, it appears that none of these 6 projects will be, or 5 out of 6 won't be on time or under budget. 5 of the 6 storage projects need their dates pushed back, and 4 of the 6 projects are anticipating some degree of cost escalation here. As you recognize, Mr. Cleaver, what's before us today is an extension of the deadlines for good cause. Although from the comments I've heard from most, if not all, of my colleagues, I think you've largely received what you sought here. You did make those requests for two express statements, and I'll read them. The first is that additional project costs exceeding those included in the current filing before us may be subject to disallowance in a future rate filing. I think that statement need not be repeated. It's laid on the table. It always exists, that there is some potential for a disallowance in a future rate case. The commission doesn't give carte blanche, whether it be a state authorized required project or not, for the utilities to spend limitless amounts on any particular project. With respect to your second item, that the commission will not grant any future operational extensions without a compelling reason that is entirely unforeseeable at this time. That does, at least from my perspective, put the commission in a little bit more of a box. But I see what you're doing, Mr. Cleaver, and you want the utility to be on notice that these projects need to be developed within a reasonable amount of time, even though 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 will be missing their mark per the original proposal. So I share your concerns, your frustration. I think Commissioner Herman articulated it well, and you've heard it from other commissioners today. To the extent the commissioner approves the proposal or the proposed motion that I'm about to offer, I suspect the commission will be less generous at a future date if the joint utilities come forward asking for either an increased budget or an additional delay of operational deadlines. With that being said, I'm prepared to propose a motion that we approve the requested operational date extensions for good cause pursuant to Public Utilities Article Section 7-216H6, little 2 Romanet. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye, Mr. Chairman, but I think table 2 needs to be refiled to reflect today's discussion.
Duly noted. Commissioner Richard.
And I vote aye, and my vote comes with the 2 express statements that OPC proposed.
Noted. I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 5 on today's agenda, the last item, consists of Columbia Gas of Maryland, Inc.'s 2022 STRIDE project list and a surcharge proposal, as well as a status update for its 2021 STRIDE project list. On this item for staff, we have Carlos Acosta, Olivia Kirkendall, Catherine Moriarty, and for the company, Megan Moore, Rebecca Danhires, and Ken Fillion.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Kirkendall or Ms. Shea?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Catherine Moriarty on behalf of staff.
Third time's a charm. Ms. Moriarty, good morning.
Morning, thank you. Item number 5 is Columbia Gas of Maryland's annual STRIDE filing for 2022. Requesting commission approval for the company's 2022 proposed STRIDE project list and associated IRS surcharges effective January 1st, 2022 in compliance with order number 88852 issued August 28, 2018 in case number 9479. Section 4-10 of the Public Utilities Article, Annotated Code of Maryland, provides for the recovery through a surcharge of reasonable and prudent costs of investment designed to improve public safety or infrastructure reliability associated with accelerated gas company infrastructure replacements and improvements known as STRIDE programs. By order number 8852, the Commission adopted a stipulation and settlement among Columbia, the Maryland Office of People's Counsel, and Commission staff approving Columbia's second 5-year STRIDE plan. The approved plan encompasses a replacement rate of 8 miles per year of eligible infrastructure for 5 years, with a provision for cost escalation factor of up to 3.25% annually and certain tariff revisions. Using the agreed upon escalation factor, Columbia is authorized under its STRIDE 2 plan to seek STRIDE reimbursement of approximately $17,458,000 for 2022 for STRIDE eligible work covered under the STRIDE surcharge. Although the company's filing is for a slightly higher total of $17,536,745. Columbia is required to file a list of STRIDE projects annually that includes for each project the project description, location, estimated cost, type of infrastructure replaced, risk assessment, estimated date of completion, and reasons for replacement. This is Columbia's fourth Stride 2 project list and is accompanied by the company's proposed surcharges for the same period, calendar year 2022. Columbia's filing has been reviewed by the Engineering Division, the Accounting Investigations Division, and the Telecommunications, Gas, and Water Division. For 2022, Columbia proposes to replace approximately 6.44 miles of priority pipe, also bare steel, under its Stride surcharges, with projects estimated costs of $17,536,745. However, to accomplish the annual 8 miles of replacements committed, the company plans to replace an additional approximately 1.62 miles of priority pipe, which will exclude from the Stride surcharge due to total costs. All of the projects in this year's list are in the Cumberland area. All 9 projects are Stride eligible. Staff reviewed Columbia's justification for replacement and has verified the projects met the definition of eligible infrastructure as specified by Stride law. Accounting staff has reviewed the attachments associated with the proposed 2022 IRS revenue requirement and associated surcharges to become effective January 1st, 2022. On October 29, 2021, Columbia filed its annual Stride filing for 2022, which calculated a revenue requirement of $1,392,845. On November 16, 2021, Columbia filed a revised Attachment B. Revised Attachment B removes allowances for funds used during construction, in short AFUDC, from the calculation of Stride surcharges as of January 1st, 2022, in accordance with the proposed order in Columbia's most recent rate case, case number 9664. The removal of AFUDC impacted the calculated 2002 revenue requirement, but it did not affect the proposed and capped surcharges. The revised calculation of the 2022 Stride revenue requirement of $1,386,882 is based on the eligible 2002 main investments that are forecasted to cost approximately $17,536,745. This amount is immaterially
higher than the amount set forth in Columbia's Stride 2 proposal in case 9479. Accordingly, according to the Accounting Division, the filed surcharge calculations are accurate and without material discrepancies. The filing and staff's comments detail the current and proposed monthly surcharges and proposed surcharge caps for each customer class. The proposed surcharge rates for every customer class equal the proposed surcharge caps because the proposed surcharges without the caps exceed the proposed surcharges with the caps. The residential surcharge cap is $2 as per PUA 4-210D4. The surcharge cap for the non-residential classes is calculated by dividing the $2 residential monthly cap by the uncapped residential surcharge and then multiplying the resulting ratio by the non-residential uncapped surcharge. The surcharge cap for the non-residential classes are listed on Table 10 of staff's comments. Staff recommends that the Commission approve Columbia Gas Maryland Inc.'s 2002 project list and accept the company's proposed surcharges for filing. Ms. Olivia Kuykendall from Telecommunications, Gas, and Water Division, Ms. Lucia Shea from the Accounting Investigation Division, and Mr. Carlos Acosta from the Engineering Division are available to answer any questions you have on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that summary of a very lengthy buck sheet. Thanks to the staff team. We'll turn to the company next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Megan Moore on behalf of the company. I have nothing to add but to thank staff and the Commission, specifically Ms. Moriarty. Congratulations. And Ms. Shea, Mr. Acosta, and Ms. Kuykendall for their thorough analysis. And we are here with any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Do commissioners have any questions? Seeing none, I would move that we approve the company's 2022 project list and accept the company's proposed surcharges for filing. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Before we adjourn today, we will be having a hearing in case number 9645. That's Baltimore Gas and Electric Company's multi-year rate application. That proceeding will begin at 11:25 a.m. You may remain in this room. You do not need to disconnect. That proceeding will start in 10 minutes at 11:25 a.m. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.